We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. This is Lou Palumbo. This is Operation Truth. With me, as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes, former Assistant Director of the FBI, which, if you've been listening to these podcasts, he has an amazing amount of credible, intimate knowledge of the FBI and other ongoings that, I guess, encompassed our government. With us today for the first episode, we're going to have with us Rick Robillard. Rick has been a guest before. We're going to get into some discussions about free speech, what's going on in our colleges, these most recent hearings where they were conducted by Congresswoman Stefanik. But I want to start off with Tom, because I keep hearing, and it's continuously been reported, Tom, that a lot of these monies that are being sent to the Ukraine are going to places like pensions and paying their civil service employees. Can you elaborate on that, Tom? And while you're at it, and I want to go down this avenue also, because I know you've spoken to the oppressive tactics that may be going on in the Ukraine. You'll speak to that again. And then ultimately that's going to tie into us hearing that American journalist has been taken into custody in the Ukraine. So I want to first start, Tom, with you with this whole issue about money.
Okay, Lou, about 2 years ago, the lady that runs USAID held press conferences in the Ukraine announcing that the USAID had funded the development of a new app that was going on, being put on internet for Ukrainian citizens to access all kinds of benefits, pension benefits, health benefits, other information from that app. And that the app itself was not only funded by USAID, but the money that was being used to pay pensions and pay healthcare benefits and other benefits for Ukrainian citizens was provided by the US. So that was in the early packages that were going, the cash packages during the Biden administration being sent to the Ukraine. And it was pretty much, you had a number of journalists referred to that as, we have just made Ukraine the 51st state of the United States because of the benefits that we were paying, not just to sending military equipment, artillery, any of that stuff. It was for separately civilian pay, civilian benefits to Ukrainian government and private citizens in the Ukraine. So that was well publicized, I think more than 2 years ago, that we did that and that we had developed that app and it was available for all Ukrainians to be able to log into to get their benefits.
And Tom, you've also spoken about some of the tactics that have been employed by President Zelensky in oppressing those in opposition, for example. And I think you and I discussed earlier with Rick that an American journalist, has been taken into custody, if I understand it correctly, because he contradicted the president of the Ukraine.
I don't have the details on the American journalist doing that, but we know, and it's been widely reported, that Zelensky, first of all, when he came to power, locked up his principal opponent and then lengthened his jail sentence to multi-year sentence. So the principal person that ran against him and presumably would run against him next time is in jail for a long time. Then we have Zelensky taking on the Orthodox Church of the Ukraine and locking up priests and nuns because they don't toe the line with going along with policies that he's implemented in the Ukraine. So that's been widely reported, what he's done with the Christian church there. So that's several things. And he's shut down a number of newspapers and magazines in the Ukraine who ran articles contradicting him, and locked up journalists there that are Ukrainian. I'm not as familiar with the details on the American journalist, but certainly he's done that with Ukrainian all along. And then most recently, Ukraine was supposed to have elections this fall, and he canceled them. So basically, he's done a number of policy moves to, basically that are tyrannical in the Ukraine.
Rick, do you have any knowledge as to what transpired with this American journalist that's now in the custody of the Ukrainian government? Because I think you brought it up in a prior conversation with us. Rick? We may have lost him. Okay. In any event, Tom, the other thing that concerns me is, this a misunderstanding, this misperception of the Ukraine. The Ukraine, correct me if I'm wrong, has always had problems of corruption prior to the Russian invasion, prior to any of our involvement. Is that not correct?
Yeah, it's been widely regarded as the most corrupt country in all of Europe. It's been described that way for a long time.
Interesting. And what's even more interesting is now individuals are speaking about the Vice President of the United States having knowledge that his son was doing business with entities in the Ukraine, such as Burisma. I wonder why members of the House and the Senate, regardless of their political affiliation, haven't spoken to this disbursement of funds for things that are clearly not related to Russia invading the Ukraine. I find it interesting, once again, that we selectively address some of these programs, or whatever we might refer to them as, in various countries. Now, you and I have spoken about the fact that they're right now trying to allocate another $60+ billion to the Ukraine. But there's a little glitch there. Am I right, Tom?
Yeah, right now you have finally members of Congress saying enough is enough, and wanting to withhold it or tie further aid to Ukraine to stopping the border incursion, tightening the Mexican border with the United States to prevent all of these billions of or millions of people that have entered illegally from continuing to enter illegally. So this is the first time that you have any strings attached, let's say, to Ukrainian aid. Now, if you recall, 2 years ago, when the Russians went into Ukraine and Zelensky, was going on television and traveling to the United States and talking to our Congress, he was basically nicknamed the Winston Churchill of our times. And, what a dynamic leader and what a patriot and freedom fighter in the Ukraine. And, now there's all these different reports that come out about basically how much money he's pocketed personally, plus members of his staff, senior military officials, including that Zelensky's been able to purchase a luxury home in South Florida near Miami, also a home in Italy and on the Mediterranean, and I think on the Black Sea was another location. And then last week it was reported that a couple of surrogates of his actually went and paid $75 million for a luxury yacht on behalf of Zelensky. So you just have these continuing allegations that Zelensky himself has financially benefited from the U.S. aid that we sent to the Ukraine.
Very interesting, Tom. What I think the public should be clear about is that they didn't become corrupt after Russia invaded them. They didn't stop being corrupt. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom.
Oh, exactly.
After Russia invaded them. And let me just ask you this question, if I may. I want you to answer this for me. Why are we so married to them at the hip, or attached to them at the hip? What do you think?
I have a theory, and it's just my opinion, that basically Biden has taken the Biden family, on behalf of the big guy, have taken in so much money, millions, from the Ukraine, plus the employment of Hunter Biden on the Burisma energy company's board, that basically, and they have all of the evidence, and there's been informant rumors that went to the FBI saying that one of these informants has recorded conversations with a senior official from Ukraine describing how that official had multiple conversations on the phone with Joe Biden discussing money that was going to be paid, through a circuitous route of different LLCs and transferring mechanisms, but ultimately to the Biden family, which is still bribery, even if he doesn't touch any of it. The family gets rich, that's still bribery of the public official. Now, at the time, all of that information was coming out. And of course, Joe Biden is saying he never talked to his son about business. He didn't talk to any of his associates. And then later you've got photographs of them having dinner together, playing golf together, actually giving statements to the congressional inquiry that, they've talked to Joe. He was well aware of what Hunter Biden was up to during those days, of how he was getting paid by Burisma, I think $80-some thousand a month to be on their board. And then when the prosecutor started investigating that, Joe Biden travels to the Ukraine and tells them, you've got to fire that prosecutor. And if you don't, I'm going to withhold $2 billion in U.S. taxpayer aid to the Ukraine if you don't. And you hear Joe in a taped video interview where he looks at his watch, I'm going to be on the plane in 5 hours and you better do this or you're not going to get the money. And then son of a bee, they did it. They fired this guy. And, Burisma was on under investigation, I should say. And you've got Hunter Biden on their board, making tens of thousands of dollars a month while he's on that board. So you have all of these allegations and other information, FBI informant information, that basically Joe Biden and the Biden family were getting money from the Ukraine. So to me, that's one of the reasons I think every penny Zelensky's ever asked for, Biden's tried to give it to him. And it's because of trying to keep his mouth shut about the direct evidence of the Biden family taking money from the Ukraine.
And Tom, all these points are very well taken. And I want to say one other thing about this issue, about it insulting the intelligence of the American public. They're trying to explain to the public with this term called influence peddling. Why does anyone think anyone would ever deal with a crack addict, an admitted crack addict and alcoholic, to the tunes of millions of dollars if it wasn't for the purpose of accessing one of our officials? I'm becoming concerned about what's going on in our, you understand where I'm going with this, Tom? I mean, I don't understand this, Tom. Why else would anybody go near Hunter Biden? Because they're starting to speak about what he didn't bring, what attributes he didn't bring to the discussion. So, this is getting to the point where it insults the intelligence of the public. What are the reason would anybody do business with this kid if it weren't for the purpose of accessing his father to gain influence?
No,
it's
absolutely.
that basic, fundamental, and simple. And now we've got a paper trail. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is your lane. You guys did this, financial crimes, etc., linking millions of dollars. Am I correct, Tom?
Yep. For some reason, I think I'm about to lose my internet. But anyway.
I'll stick with it. But you know what I want to do, Tom, for one moment? I want to bring Rick in. Rick, are you there, buddy?
I am, Lou. I had lost my hearing for a bit, but I'm back.
Okay. I want you to speak a little bit to the history of our country and the Ukraine prior to this administration, because I know you have some insight as to what the relationship might have been.
Sure. After the Soviet Union fell, all of these Eastern Bloc countries wanted to become their own independent countries. And we in the West really wanted them to be democratic countries with stable governments, because we thought that that would be in their best interest and our best interest. In Ukraine, the United States and a group of donor agencies started supporting them financially early on. But the problem was the people of Ukraine had grown up under the old Soviet system where corruption was endemic, where the state provided things, and they, in some senses, they were comfortable with that system. They understood it. When everything broke up, what the old Soviet Union did is they actually gave shares to people for free, that they could have shares of the new corporations that would be now established in a democratic society, so they could share in the profits. But they didn't understand democracy. And some smart Russians with a lot of money bought those shares for pennies on a dollar. That's how they became oligarchs. These investments produced enormous profits for a small number of people, leaving the population without very much. The other thing that was going on is the people who lived in these countries were used to a system of corruption. I find it ironic that we stand here, you talk so often about the southern border, that we have people flee a type of society that the young people in America seem to want to have. That's sort of a socialist communist thing, but those societies create corruption, and that corruption did not go away just because the United States and other countries wanted them to become a free, stable, law-abiding democracy. What the United States did is we worked through our ambassadors with the Ukraine to attempt to establish honest governmental departments in the Ukraine. Finally, in around 2014, 2016 timeframe, we had enough. We knew that we'd seen corrupt prosecutors. We had insisted that the Ukrainian government get rid of them. So finally, what we did, together with the Ukrainians and the member nations, we said, look, it's not going to work this way anymore. What we want is a vetted prosecutorial team, a vetted investigative team to look into corruption in the Ukraine, and in particular, try to recover the $40 billion that the former president had stolen and taken to Russia. We insisted on that before we would send any more money, and the Ukrainians agreed. The problem is that corruption there is so endemic and it's so enriching to individuals, even though they agree, they continue down the path of corruption.
So
And it has been a constant struggle with the United States. Most of that corrupt money, the stolen money, winds up going back to Russia.
So Rick, if I'm clear,
Yeah,
we're still dealing with a corrupt Ukraine.
sure.
Tom, you
Yeah,
agree, Tom?
absolutely. Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, we're continuously feeding this animal in a disproportionate manner. Now, I want to transition just for one moment, Tom, because now we're hearing discussions that I'd like you to comment on, and there's possibly motivations behind these discussions about us putting troops on the ground in the Ukraine. Tom, is that right?
Yeah, you had the Secretary of Defense making a public speech a couple of days ago, and I've seen the actual speech, and he actually says, and they're talking about funding, money going to the Ukraine, and Congress hasn't authorized it yet, and they really ought to. And oh, by the way, we might be sending troops, American troops, on the ground to Ukraine. Now, you remember earlier when the whole Russian-Ukraine war started, February 22, where Biden says, we're never going to put U.S. troops, we are not going to be fighting in the Ukraine. We're going to give them money. We're going to give them all the equipment they need. NATO's going to give them equipment. Everybody is going to fund and equip the Ukrainian military to take on Russia, but U.S. troops will never set foot on the ground in the Ukraine, especially to take on a war with Russia. And now you have the Secretary of Defense just this past week saying, you know, we might have to put troops on the ground there.
I have a question for you, though, Tom, and Rick, you can answer this as well. And it's speculative, the response. I wonder how well that would go over with the American public after just losing another 5,000 young Americans, not counting the ones that have come back here emotionally and physically in pieces, a 20-year war. I wonder how well that's going to go over.
It wouldn't. That's the whole point. The whole point of this is that it would not go well. And the members of the Congress know that it won't go well with the public if all of a sudden American men and women are on the ground in the Ukraine. So therefore, give in to the administration. You want $65 billion? Take it. Take it. Don't put our troops on the ground because we'll pay the price come election time.
Yeah, Rick, you want to comment on this?
I agree with Tom on that. Sending boots on the ground in Ukraine is not politically viable for this country. I think it's a hollow threat.
You know,
But
well,
nevertheless,
that's-
but it's a threat, nevertheless, that members of Congress are going to listen to, because, you know, they know troops on the ground there would absolutely devastate their campaigns, you know, when they've been backing everything up to go to the Ukraine up till now.
Yeah, but guys, I want to say this. I wouldn't put it past this country to pull a stunt like that, quite candidly, about putting troops on the ground in the Ukraine. You know, there's a whole nother discussion that we haven't had the draft in quite some time. I mean, they would obviously have to reinstate the draft in order to facilitate some additional support. I mean, they're not going to send 10,000 troops to the Ukraine. I would suspect they'd have to send 100,000 if it was going to have any impact. You know, guys,
No, you're right, Lou. If I could interrupt you there,
Go ahead.
that's also leading to rumors, not just about the draft, but you've had reports, news reports showing, you know, hundreds of Chinese young males that have come across the border. And you have one reporter in a report last week tracking them from Colombia in South America to various hotels en route to the Mexican-American border. And all of these Chinese, you know, his reporting is basically who's funding payment of these hotels and giving these individual young 20-year-olds from China money and ability and transportation to get them from Colombia in South America into the United States. And among the rumors of that is that this might be a Chinese plan, not just to bring spies in or any of that, but get them into the United States to join our military, because our military is so desperate now for manpower. And if they join the military, they could become U.S. citizens down the road if they join our military.
You know, I think, you know, in a very broad sense, and I just want to say this in a general sense, you know, it seems like with most large entities, as this country has become, we've lost our ability to manage it. And I think a lot of these problems are going to continue to unfold. I want to transition, Tom and Rick, if I may, to these congressional hearings with Congresswoman Stefanik speaking to the presidents of MIT, the University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard, and their responses as to what would be tolerable rhetoric on their campuses in relationship to what's going on with Israel and the Palestinians. And, you know, once again, and you guys, I said this to you up there, and I've said this on air a number of times, that during the Kennedy administration, the coining a phrase of the best and the brightest, they referenced all the college educated, the Ivy Leaguers. And I jokingly say, tongue in cheek, which I mean, look what the smart people are doing. Look what the smart people are doing here. These are presidents of some of the most prestigious universities in the country, and they're employing intellectual arrogance, using the word context. You know, we spoke off air about this, that when you reference to kill any demographic, is that protected under free speech if you're trying to prompt people to kill Jews or Catholics or Italians or Irish? I mean, how is this part of free speech? You can't yell fire in a movie theater. Tom, we spoke about that. You elaborated. I suggest you do it again because you understand the context. But where's the line in the sand when your speech involves possibly inciting violence? How much free speech do we have or should we have? And while we're on it, you know, we could talk about the media and the lack of oversight and their ability to say whatever they want, whenever they want, to whatever topic it might be. But I want to ask you, where are we going with this First Amendment issue?
Well, the First Amendment, you know, the rulings have been that the threats have to be more specific than just generally saying, you know, from the river to the sea, meaning wipe out Israelis, or, you know, I favor the Palestinians, or I favor Hamas. You have to make a more specific threat to a group. So, for example, you have to break a law. If you threaten somebody specifically, whether it's on the internet or face-to-face or by telephone or by mail, that can be, depending how specific the threat is against the person, it can be a violation of U.S. law or in most cases, state law. But if it's a more generalized threat that you you favor what Israel's doing in Gaza, or you don't favor it, you think it's genocide. All of those public statements are going to be considered, free speech type statements. Now, as far as the universities go, Ivy League universities are allowed a stricter version of censorship on their campus because, or freedom of speech on their campus, because they're private institutions. They have their own endowments and everything, whereas state universities are under more state type control, under the government control. So there's a difference in what's allowed on the campus of Harvard or Yale or Princeton or University of Pennsylvania compared to what would be allowed at the University of Virginia or University of, whatever state school it might be. So
If I could ask
it's
you,
very nuanced, and the constitutional lawyers that talk on this issue often disagree and contradict each other on what really is allowed or what isn't allowed.
so I want to ask you this question, Tom. If you and I are standing alone and I threaten to kill you, right? They can arrest you for doing that.
Yeah, you make a specific threat to do that to me.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So here's my question next. So if I make a specific threat to a particular demographic, like the Jewish community, for example, and I say, I want you all to go out there and kill the Jews, isn't that a criminal act, Tom?
If you're
I mean,
trying to incite specific violence against specific people, yeah, that would
And that's
be
what
against the law.
they're, Tom, isn't that what they're doing though?
Well, in some cases, yeah.
Rick,
But you
wanna
have
jump
these
in here?
university presidents basically
Yeah.
trying to favor, the anti-Jewish demonstrations and statements and pro-Hamas statements and all of that. And right now they're paying the political price. So you have a University of Pennsylvania president, about the first to step down, although she's a faculty, she's a tenured member of the faculty. So it's not, she's still going to be employed there and have, guarantee of lifetime employment, basically. The other ones, we're waiting to hear what the other presidents of the other schools do, if they step down or what happens with them.
Rick, you want to give an opinion as to what you think's going on here?
Sure. My opinion, Lou, is the universities we're talking about have stepped into their own bullshit and now they're caught. That's my opinion. And I mean it this way. Instead of being places you go to learn, places of excellence, a safe environment where you can discuss, and that's what young people should do. They should challenge, they should discuss, they should do all that. Well, instead of doing that, what they've become is institutions of politics and social engineering. Institutions where you better say the politically correct thing. Imagine the response we would be listening to now if all of these demonstrations, things going on campus against Jewish people were against gays or transgenders or peoples of certain race. What do you think those presidents of the universities would be saying then? My bet is it'd be a completely different response. So, when you look at these schools, here's what they've done. You can actually get a degree, mind you, in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't know what the hell that is or why you'd want a degree in that, but you can get it if you're willing to pay for it. In the humanity, and the source on this is a great piece by Fareed Zacharias that was in the New York Times this weekend. And Fareed points out that the whole study of humanities in this university, and you're going to love this one, the whole study of humanities, the median grade is an A. Can you imagine that? The median grade is an A. So what the path they're on, I don't see so much of a free speech issue, although the points you raise are excellent points, but I just see a whole community that has just stepped in their own bullshit and now they're caught.
So I want to go back to Tom for a second. Tom, you there, buddy?
Yeah, they're caught on this one.
No, I have a question for you, Tom. I have a question I got for you. So on the heels of what Rick just said, what would be the response if they were on a campus and they said, kill the gays, right?
Yeah.
I wonder what the response would be, Tom. We'd have a federal investigation. Am I not right?
No, you know it. You've heard our president talk about that. It's not going to be allowed at any level. They'll investigate it. They'll look at what kind of endowments and funding. And that's one of the other interesting things about this argument is that these Ivy League schools are private. Well, you have a number of them getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government to do research on a variety of topics. So they're getting funding from the United States government along with their, high-level donors that they have. So there's just so much hypocrisy in this that, it's just hard to describe it.
Well, at this point, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I want to continue this conversation. This discussion about the First Amendment, what is protected speech and what isn't, this is getting interesting, because I understand the concept behind the First Amendment. I understand the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, and all the amendments that were passed afterwards. I understand what we're dealing with here. But what's that threshold, even with the media, as to what they're allowed to knowingly do in disseminating information that is not truthful or accurate, and at times polarizing, where it pits us against each other? How are you allowed to do this? And I understand you're allowed to have opinions, but I think there should be a higher standard attached to your speech when you have this broader influence over the culture. We're going to take a quick break, guys. Stick with us. This is Operation Truth. You can contact us through operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Just stay with us. This is Operation Truth. With me is my co-host, Tom Fuentes, and Rick Robillard. Rick is of similar background to Tom. He's a former FBI agent. He was the special agent in charge of criminal investigation. Tom, as I reminded you, is the former assistant director of the FBI with quite an interesting career. Tom, I want to shift gears, although all these conversations intersect because they ultimately determine the future of our children, our young people, and the future of this country. But talking about the borders now, we're looking at the Republicans, correct me if I'm wrong, attempting to apply pressure for funding by interfering with the funding of the Ukraine. Want to talk a little bit about that, Tom?
Yeah, I think the Republicans are starting to wake up and realize that the public does not like having our borders open, whether it be the southern border with Mexico. It's a little tighter at the northern border because Canada has checkpoints to go in and out of the U.S. And so to go to the U.S. immigration authorities, you're going through the Canada one way or the other, and they're a little more protective of their border than we are of ours. But at the southern border, it's pretty much wide open. And, the estimates that 8 to 10 million people have come across that border in the last 3 years, is a major issue. Well, now it's become even more of a major issue, especially with the recent reporting, even by the FBI director, Christopher Wray, that he's worried about national security because the border has been open and Hamas and Hezbollah have training centers in Mexico. And they only have to just walk across our border and they're into our country and can easily then commit an attack against the U.S., whether it's a cyber attack or actual bombings or other such attacks. So suddenly the Republicans are realizing, this might be an important issue next year, 2024 elections. And so what's happened recently is several high-ranking Republicans have told the administration, you're asking for $60+ billion in additional aid to go to the Ukraine. How about you tighten up the borders or you don't get the money? And so now you have this interplay between the Republicans in Congress and the Biden administration about what to do with the border. And the Republicans, have that issue now that they're trying to raise, that we won't support your aid to Ukraine if you don't support our desire to tighten the borders and implement border security at the border. So that's probably one of the biggest issues going right now regarding border security.
I was asked today again, why are we embracing a border policy the way that we are? Someone asked me, why would we be doing this? And one of the obvious answers is that the Democrats, with their usual enticing of minority groups, etc., are hoping to build a voting base. And what I said to the person is a lot of the people that are coming into the country from Central and South America, they're Catholic, they're Roman Catholic, a lot of them. and they're escaping socialism. The last thing that they want to do is insert themselves into another environment that lends itself to socialism. But I want to ask you something else, Tom, because I'm hearing reports that armed members of drug cartels have actually penetrated our borders. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh, absolutely. They're trafficking people, drugs, other contraband across that border. They've been doing it now for several years. They're making a fortune at the border. And you see some of the people coming across and they put colored wristbands on them to say that they still owe the cartel $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 for the transport across the border, and then being hooked up, with people that'll help them get into the interior and go around, so they can become gotaways, go around U.S. immigration authorities that are running these checkpoints. Now, the checkpoints basically, when the person goes across the border and checks in at one of these facilities, then they're given a court, they plead, I want asylum or I want to be a refugee. And they're given a court date 5, 6, 8 years from now with the idea that you'll never see them again. But they've checked in and they're on their way into the interior of the country. So, but the cartels they've been running this operation for several years, making a fortune. It's been widely reported how much money they're making.
Tom, they've actually provided us photographs of cartel members in body armor, or ballistic vests, and carrying M4s.
Not M4s, Javelin missiles that run about $1 million a piece. An M4 is a couple $100. That's no big deal. And everybody's got an M4 somewhere, or an M16, or these Army infantry type weaponry. But some of these shoulder-fired missiles that they're walking around in, they could have only gotten it through the arms trade of stolen weaponry being trafficked by the Ukrainian military, or military equipment we left behind when we abandoned Afghanistan and left over $80 billion in equipment. So a shoulder fire weapon like the Javelin, those cartels would not be running around if we hadn't basically contributed to a worldwide arms trade of our weaponry, either stolen through the Ukraine by their generals, or left behind in Afghanistan or in other countries.
I want to go to Rick for a second. Rick, I'm interested in your opinion, if you're there, Rick.
I am here, yes.
Oh, okay. As to what's the agenda attached to the way we're managing the southern borders? I mean, what is it as a government, as a country, we're trying to accomplish? I mean, is it just changing a voting base? What's driving this?
Well, I don't think it's changing the voting base. I don't even know if we're trying to accomplish anything, really. The fact of the matter is that the way it looks to me is there's, I guess, millions of people leaving their country, coming to our southern border. I don't think we're pushing them this way. I think they're just leaving the country to come here for a better life. It's when they get to the southern border, what happens and what do we do? I think the breakdown here, I mean, my take on this goes like this. I don't see when I look at the mass shootings we're having in the United States, I don't see immigrants doing that. I see white males doing that predominantly.
Not yet, Rick. Not yet.
Not yet, but so far.
They had another homicide at the hands of a migrant, by the way.
Sure.
It was reported in the news today. And one of those is too many. Let me just interrupt you for a
Go ahead,
second.
please.
Along with 3 sexual assaults up in northern part of New York, above the city. 2 of them were rapes. So, it's not like there isn't crime. The crime isn't ticking up. But I don't think it's safe to just hang our hats on the fact that they haven't participated in our mass shootings yet. Because if you listen to our FBI director, he's telling you there's grave concern that we're going to see an uptick in terrorist activity here as a result of this border. He spoke about it over 6 months ago. He said the southern border of the United States is our threat to our national security. I would think that would have been the wake-up call for the government, but it isn't. But continue. I want you to continue.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not in a position to dispute him about that point. And nobody could make a case that letting anybody who wants to come into the country come in is a policy for any country, including ours. I mean, it's unquestionable that we have to have control of our southern border. The point I'm just trying to make is I just don't believe that there is any evidence whatsoever that the people who have been let into the country through the southern border are committing crimes at any rate higher than native-born Americans. I just don't see that as a threat. And let me finish one thought.
We don't need any more people committing crimes, though. And you see, here's something else that's going under or not reported. In the city of New York, the number of crimes that are being committed by migrants is being commingled with those that are being committed by citizens of the United States. And there is a need to separate them out because we don't need any more help in the committing of crimes. You see what I'm saying to you?
No,
and
absolutely.
To me, one
Right, well, I mean,
homicide, one sexual assault, one kidnapping is one too many. We're fueling something that's extremely dangerous, Rick. I think you would agree that.
Yeah.
Listen, I hear what you're saying. There are a number of people coming to that border looking for a better life, just like our ancestors.
Sure.
But commingled within is a demographic or an element that's of ill intent. And what really is making this 10 times worse is that we don't have an ability to vet them. So we're letting people in by the millions that we know nothing about them. You know,
Right.
so, you know, the bottom line is, you know, what's the solution to the border at this point? We're going to get into that, guys, in the next episode. We're going to have to conclude this one. I want to thank you for joining us. You've had Rick Robillard, former FBI, Tom Fuentes, former FBI, abundance of information, gentlemen. This is Operation Truth. You can reach us at Operation Truth Official at gmail.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time, next episode.
Okay.
TJ,
Yeah.
I want to Tom. Where's Tom?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
I want to continue this conversation about this whole border and everybody coming in and all the dynamics attached to it. You know, not being able to vet them, disrupting our cities, as the mayor says in New York, going to destroy our cities, so on and so forth. And I also want to talk, Tom, about crime in DC. We could talk a little bit about, if you want, the female FBI agent who was carjacked, what took place there, and the fact that the Bureau or the government in general hasn't disseminated any additional information in regards to what took place there. And I think we should talk about the crime overall in the country and the crime in DC. Mention the carjackings as we did before. Okay.
So Lou, before we go, question for you. I'm just a guest, but my inclination is to bring other points of view to these topics and other facts. If that doesn't fit, you know what I'm saying? You're okay with that, right?
Absolutely. I'm not
Okay.
looking for us. Tom and I don't agree on everything also. I mean,
Right.
you know, the key is not to rubber stamp each other's bullshit. The key is to bring a
correct,
different
yeah.
perspective to the conversation and then, you know, have an exchange with some civility, which has left the conversation in the country.
Right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I have no problem with
Okay.
a point of view. But, you know, Rick, just to touch on this issue with the border, I understand there's a considerable number of people that have left everything they know to traverse 2,000 and 3,000 miles to get the things that Americans take for granted. But the problem is the feasibility of 8 or 10 million plus coming through the southern border that we can't manage on any level. This is just sheer, it's like chaos down there. And that's what's being reported there. But I have no issue with opposing views. That's what we want. But look, I want people to get involved in this conversation that aren't as conservative as we are. You see my point? You know, I just like to ask people a simple question. Forget your politics. Look at the condition of this country. Look what we've done to the future of our children. You're okay with that because you have some misaligned loyalty to one party or another? We would be openly critical if these were Republicans doing it. It happens to be Democrats. So I have no issue with opposing views. You know what I mean? That's
Okay.
it. And we're not
Yeah.
insulting each other like these guys do in the debates. You see
No.
my point? No, I
What
mean,
is-
seriously.
what did you say? I'm sorry.
I
I
said
didn't hear
we're
you.
not insulting each other as they're doing in the debates because we differ of opinion. That's what's wrong with the conversation today. And we lack civility. Okay. So let us reconvene and then we'll come back to round 2.